What's up, everybody? So here we are today. Another fantastic day of airbrushing. What's up? What's happening? Here, I think that camera's a little too dark. Let me just adjust this real quick. I think that's better. Should be. There you go. Cool. So welcome everybody, and we're going to be going over some practice tips to help you develop your good old itchy trigger finger practice, and that's what we'll be doing today. Let me turn down this music. I feel like it's a little too loud. Get this. There you go. All right. So again, we're going to be using this watercolor paper. It's 9x12, 140 pound paper. 140 pound paper is probably the most important part of this. It makes a nice thick paper, and it's really like resistant to applying paint. So like it's not going to get all warped or weird and stuff like that. If you like this paper, you want to get yourself some. There's a link down below where you could go ahead and get yourself some of the paper here. In the past, I've done this finger control stuff again on regular paper towels. So if you're like a beginner, like a really beginner, like you just started, maybe it's good to just take some paper towels, maybe just some regular print paper to start practicing on. But for those of you that have been here for a while, right, and maybe you already been airbrushing for, the past year or something like that, and you're looking to improve your finger control, like get nice finer lines and stuff like that, this exercise will be good for you as well. But having the paper helps. So going forward, like we're going to be pushing the quality, right? So that it includes pushing you guys to get a little more detail, a little bit more fine with your work as we go forward. So again, the link to this paper is down below. If you want to practice on metal, so if your plan is to do like metal sheets or like artwork on metal or whatever like that, you should have yourself a piece of metal and have it primed out or sealed up in Autoborn white sealer to get the best results. But again, this is just practice. So even if you're doing, if you plan to do the metal stuff and all that, practicing on paper is a good way to transfer your skills over once it comes to that. But anyway, for today's exercise, we're going to be using the 4011 reducer and the Createx Wicked Black. So I chose the Wicked Black because from feedback, so a lot of you guys say you have the Wicked, you don't have the illustration, and that's fine. That's usually a natural progression of stuff. If you start with the standard Createx, the Wicked was the next line to show up, and now they have the illustration paints, which are even finer. If you have illustration paints, illustration black, I would recommend doing it with illustration black. But if you have Wicked or even the standard, it'll all work fine. We're going to reduce it really fine anyway. Again, just to start pushing you guys and pushing this whole thing forward. We're really going to reduce it and make it fine so that we can get some nice fine details and nice results. So paint mixture, I have about a quarter of the cup, like right there, like that far into the cup. You see where my nail is? Like right there. That's about how much reducer's in there. It's in there. You can see it moving around, but if I tilt it too far, it's gonna spill. It's in there. Anyway, right, like we got a good amount of reducer. All we want to do is gonna throw in maybe 5 or 6 drops of the black. Right, so again, if you're just beginning, if you just bought an airbrush and this is your first time airbrushing or whatnot, you don't have to reduce this hard. You could probably even just shoot it straight out of the bottle. It's fine. It'll be a little bit more forgiving, and yeah. If again you've been airbrushing for a while, just add in about 5 5 or 6 drops. I'm gonna do 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 drops. 7? Yeah, it's gonna be 7 so I could get that one off of there. So just 7 drops. So we're working with super reduced paint, right? Like super ultra reduced. And for this exercise, the reason we want to reduce the paint so much is so you kind of have to work on your control as you're spraying, right? Let's not forget to mention the air pressure and maybe even set my gauge here because I don't know what it's set at right now. But we're going to be doing about 20 psi for today's exercise. 20 psi over reduced. Like you could set it at 20, and if it drops down to 18 when you're spraying, that's just fine too. We're going to be doing really reduced, really fine spraying. So let me just set this gauge. Get that air pressure out. That's about right. So we got a nice, really fine spray. Now, for this particular exercise, I would recommend having, you know, a 0.3, 0.2, you know, kind of size in between there. This is a 0.3 airbrush. If you have a 0.2, this is actually a really good way to spray your paints at 0.2. If you have a 0.5, like if you got any, like a BCS or something like that, it'll work just fine. Just you're gonna have a little bit more, you know, you're gonna have to do a little bit more work to get really fine results. But anyway, let's move this up here to the top and get you guys in there. Maybe zoom out and then zoom in. There you go. So we're gonna start up here at the top. So again, just like the first exercise or the exercise for beginners, we're gonna start the same way, and that is by making some dots, right? Now, this year, and again pushing forward, all you guys that have been airbrushing for a while, I want you to make me the finest dot that you can. Just a really tiny dot. Make sure you've mixed up your paint really well, shaking it up really good. I don't know if I showed that, but make sure you shake it. Shake it. If you don't feel comfortable shaking it in the airbrush, you could always pre-mix your paint in a separate container. That's fine. And we'll be experimenting more with that in the coming months. But for now, we're not really trying to get any kind of specific paint mixture. We just want paint to spray really fine. That's all we're looking for. So again, just get really close, right? We're going to get really close. And on this airbrush has this front here, so I'm kind of using that as an anchor point along with my fingers, right, to make sure I keep my needle away, but get it as close as I can here, and just can lightly pull back. That little tiny dot. Can you guys even see that dot? Let's see. Right, just make me the finest dot that you can. Now everybody's going to be different, but make me the finest one that you possibly can with your airbrush. You know, go in nice and close. And again, we're going to make a line going down of dots, but I want them nice and even, nice and straight. Again, it's all to build control, not just in your fingers, but also in your hands. So if you control yourself to make a nice straight line, it'll all help in the end. So just a nice, even, little tiny dot, right? So all we're doing is barely pulling back on the trigger, and that's it. If you get a little bit of splatter like that, it's totally fine. The paint's like really reduced, so don't feel too bad on yourself, but just the finest dot. And it should just take but a little slight pull, and I want you to make me a line of dots just going down. Again, try to keep them nice and straight, nice and even, and all about the same. Don't go all freaking cowboy on me and make them all different, right? So next to that, just do another row, right? And people would argue this is really boring, but it's the fundamentals equal up to the technicals, right? So once you get used to really getting your airbrush to spray like this, and getting these little fine dots, you get your finger used to knowing how far to pull back and when to stop, right? Don't go beyond a certain point with your finger. Once you get to a certain point, you stop, and then you let it go. You stop, let it go, stop, let it go. Also knowing how quickly to let go forward. Not let go of the air up, right? There's a difference. Forward. You want to keep the air down as you're doing your line. Keep the air pressed. Don't let go of the air. All you're doing is pulling back and pulling forward and just making nice little rows of dots. Right? And that's just going to help you understand when to pull and when to release the trigger. When to pull, what would you call moving it forward? I say release, right? So when to pull and when to release on the trigger, but always keep it pressed down. You never lift up. You keep it pressed while you're doing these dots, and get your finger used to just pulling and releasing on its own. I would practice this a lot. If you're just starting, I would just go ahead and practice this. I still do this from time to time, just to make sure that I'm still, I could do those pencil thin lines, and just get it all as even, and every year just progressing a little bit more, right? So you always want to just test yourself and make sure that you're always there. So from here, we obviously move on to lines, right? We've got the dots, and once you're satisfied and you've got a lot of dots, obviously I'm only doing 3 rows, but I would recommend you do a full page of dots, and just don't let go of the air, and just always push yourself, move a little bit faster, move forward, and go from there. Again, the finest dot that you can. All these dots should be the finest, and they should all look about the same. I don't want no big dot, little dot, big dot, little dot. If you're doing it like that, you need to keep practicing, right? They need to all be about the same, nice and even, nice and straight, right? So you got them straight this way and straight going up and down. Control, it's all about control. So you want to control your hands, know when to pull, when to release, where to place your airbrush, and move forward. So it's all about precision at this point, right? So moving on to lines, kind of the same thing. We want to do some lines going down, and then we're going to do some lines kind of going across. The finest line that you can. Now, if you could do a fine dot, you could do a fine line, because lines are just moving dots with an airbrush. If you can make a dot, then all you do is move that dot, it makes a line. So let me show you. We start at the top here. Let me make sure this. We start at the top right here, right? And we make a dot, and then we just pull that dot nice and down and release. Right? You always want to make sure you have a release. Like that's what she said. No, have a stopping point, because if you don't, then you're just gonna kind of have a whole bunch of sloppy lines. Make sure you start them and stop them at a good, distance. So, what's up, Jesus? How's it going? How's it going? What's up, Justice? How's it going? The Skull Squad? How's it going? Yes, yes. Thank you for showing up. Anyway, we're gonna keep moving on with our lines here, and obviously, like I said, just the finest lines, the finest you can make, and just kind of pull it down. Right, and it's all again about precision, about control, and just trying to keep them all about the same and keep it all nice and even. So again, going sideways this time. And it'll give you also a good understanding of, how to move if you're being shaky. And like the good thing about like on this paper here is you can use your fingers as, your fingers on this hand as a guide for moving around. So you set your fingers down, you rest your airbrush, then I kind of use my nails really to slide around the paper. So, you can kind of use this as support. Use your other hand as support, so that you can keep it steady. Always try to use both hands. If you use one hand, you'll find that you're always kind of a little bit shakier, no matter how good you are at it. If you use both hands, once you introduce that support, it's you know, it's kind of like any other stand. If you have a tripod, you know, it's pretty sturdy. But then if you include a fourth leg and you make it a table, you know, then you got something really sturdy. And if you know, make a 6 legs table, then it's really sturdy. Same kind of, you know, thing here. If you got a single support, it's steady enough. But once you introduce both supports, your hand really becomes nice and smooth. So make sure you're supporting both your hands using, you know, your kind of smooth movements of your back. Try not to use your elbows too much, and just try to kind of move smoothly, you know, just nice and even movements. Also, try to keep your hand relaxed, right? So don't clench the airbrush, nothing like that. My personal way of grabbing the airbrush is resting my thumb right on the valve here, and then using my middle finger on the other side here to just kind of pinch it, right? And all my other fingers are just kind of there chilling, right? Sometimes I'll just rest my fingers here on this hose part, but it's really just chilling, and then I just kind of, you know, it rests there. It's like a circle, so as long as you have it held from the bottom of the circle, it's kind of, you know, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Like I could pull on it and everything, it's not going anywhere. So yeah, keep your arm nice and steady and nice and relaxed, and you'll be fine. And that's why you do practice runs like this, so that you can get better. And when you switch over to your artwork, your hand and your finger and everything will just be nice and smoother, right? So again, moving forward. Once you have dots and lines kind of covered, right? Now I've talked a lot about the dagger stroke, and we've done dagger strokes a lot, and today is no different. The reason we do dagger strokes is because fundamentally everything you spray through the airbrush will be in the range of the cone. So once you learn the range of the cone, right? So once you learn the range of the dagger stroke, you learn the range of your airbrush, and it kind of gets programmed into your mind to know how far and how close you have to be to produce a certain shadow or line, right? So once you kind of learn that, you know, where you have to be to get a nice dagger stroke, you kind of learn how to move, you kind of learn where to place your airbrush, you know, and how, you know, again, because it's not just like you're going to do a dagger stroke going straight like this. A dagger stroke requires movement from starting from far away, and then as you go down, you're going to get closer. So once you learn that range, right, of going in far to close, it really helps a lot to produce pretty much anything you want to with the airbrush. So I always stress doing dagger strokes, and I recommend you do them going down, and once you get good at going down, do them going up. Now you'll notice too that I'm doing them really fine, really small. We're not doing big, gigantic dagger strokes. Like if you're a beginner, you know, if you're a beginner and, you know, you just started airbrushing, of course you're going to want to do them bigger, and you're going to kind of want them, you know, really, you know, pronounced. But if you've been airbrushing for a while and you're trying to move to getting those finer lines, you really want to start getting used to doing these dagger strokes nice and finer, smaller, you know, learning the tip of the cone more than the whole cone itself, you know. So there, I seen these were kind of weak, so then make sure I kind of go back. And it also helps when you get a new airbrush. So it's kind of have this GSI Krios, right? It's you know, it's a little bit different. It sprays paint really good. So I'm also giving myself a good exercise to learn the range of the airbrush. So it helps also when you get a new airbrush, maybe even with a different needle size. It helps to go through this whole exercise so you learn that new airbrush and you kind of learn its characteristics, right? So that's kind of when I review an airbrush, you'll see me do these, and you'll see me do lines and swirls, and it's just kind of to learn what the airbrush and how its spray kind of functions, right? Because every airbrush is tuned differently at the needle, at the tip. how much, diffusion, how the air is diffused around the needle and the cone, and also the size gap of between the cone and the actual, side of the cap here, right? That matters a lot because that means how much air and the actual circumference amount of air that's coming out. If it's the tighter, even if you have it at the same PSI, it could be spraying a lot less air than one that's wider. It's going to spray a nice bigger fan, of air, but it might not atomize paint as well. So it helps to also learn your airbrushes. So do them really fine. Once you got them going up, down, learn left. And then we're going to go right. So again, it's all about learning not just your airbrush, but also, advancing yourself. So, doing these exercises, and it helps later on once you kind of moving on to doing your artwork. Maybe you want to do eyelashes. Hey, guess what? You've already practiced all those little dagger strokes. Now you just got to do dagger strokes kind of curved up. And look at that. Now you've turned the dagger stroke into a functioning piece of your art, right? And depending on what you're painting and drawing, it can be very useful. So practicing the fundamentals, which is kind of what a dagger stroke is, it really will help you in the long run to achieve all that other stuff. So make sure you practice your dagger strokes, practice your dots, practice your lines, and then we're going to move on from there. So right, once you got enough practice, what's up, James? How's it going? I see you in the chat there. And so moving forward, we're going to do our swirls, our dagger stroke swirls. But again, a little bit finer, a little bit more detailed. If you've just started, do them to the best of your ability. But again, once we've reached this point, you're at a 0.3, you're at a 0.2 millimeter needle, you want to do it finer. You want to get these nice and fine, nice and even. So you want to start with the thinnest line you can make, going up and going down. Just make it a little bit thicker, and so on and so forth. And again, it's all about control and just trying to teach your arm and your finger where you have to be. If you want to make it thin, if you want to make it thick, you kind of want to keep it even. Again, keep the tops even, keep the bottoms even as you can, but make a thick line to a thin, a thin line to a thick line to a thin line to a thick line. Again, without letting go of the trigger. You see there's no stop on any of these. The whole thing is connected, right? So this is really handy for doing script and all of that, but again, it's all about learning the range of your airbrush. So once you learn, where you have to be and how close to get and how far to move away and how much to pull on the trigger and how much farther to pull back, because it's all one sweeping motion. You have to learn how to do it all in one, and it'll help you again once you go forward to doing other stuff. It'll help make sure that you know how to get that nice fine line and the nice thick line, because in your artwork that might come up, and it also just helps in general with understanding and knowing your range of your airbrush. Simple, right? So make sure you get those nice and down. Quick little practice. And if you want to do them the other way too, if you want to go, thin that way to thick, and the reason I recommend practicing going up, down, left, right is to get your feet, like your mind, right? You got to program your mind to understand that, like, hey, I still know where to be. I know where to go. I know how much to pull back. I know where to get close, where to pull far away, and it really helps. It really helps being symmetrical with your overall general strokes, right? So move forward. Last exercise, I want to do with you guys before I go here. And again, I'm just doing a quick little demonstration. But if you're at home, you're obviously, if it's your first time airbrushing, you're going to realize that it's, you know, it's not as easy as it looks first. And it's going to take some practice to get to these points. But once you get there, the more you practice it, the more consistent you'll get, and the more easier it'll become, right? So now we want to practice, again, the finger control through lines. And this time we're going to do it by doing a thin line, right? Thin line, but then we're going to do a shadowed line, right? So the thin line, you got to get it nice and close. Again, just like you're doing your finest dot. I want the finest line you can. Do it really nice and fine. Then I want you to pull back a little bit, like move away with your airbrush, right? And then you're going to pull back on the trigger. Probably, you know, just a little bit more than you did on this, not a whole lot. And you're going to get a nice shadowed line going across. Again, I want them nice and straight, nice and even. And the more you practice and you become consistent, the better they'll be. But I want you to practice this. The most important part is I want you to practice without letting go of the air. I want you to get good at just, you know, from thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick, thin, thick. So if you notice, it's all about not letting go of the air, right? So we're just trying to keep a nice pressure, smooth, and keep the paint flowing. The nice fine line, a nice thick line, a nice fine line, a nice thick line. And keep the pressure going. On all these exercises, I think that's kind of one of the most important parts, is to make sure you keep your finger pressed down. If you're doing dots, keep your finger pressed down and learn to do the dots without releasing your finger. And you'll notice too, once you got a flow of paint going, it's kind of a little bit easier and you could do it a little bit quicker. Always make sure, you know, I have a little rag like this, but just make sure you pull off any dry tip off your airbrush needle carefully, right? Just carefully pull it off and then move on. And I do mean carefully. Don't apply pressure to it in any way and bend it in any way. And just keep that pressure on and just move from one to the next dot to the next dot. And again, it's all about, you know, it's all about learning when to pull and release. And that's how you're going to develop your finger control the best way. So then from there, you can take that and you know how to make, you know, nice fuzzy dots because you've practiced the fuzzy over here. So then when you need to make some texture, right, you know how to do that little stippling, right? Right? So you want to do some skin texture and stuff like that. Well, guess what? Knowing all them dots, it really helps because you could build up the shadow of the pore like this, and then you come in right in the middle of that little shadow and you put in a nice hard dot, and it really starts giving a nice skin texture. But it's all comes from doing the dots and you know, the standard stuff. So if you learn the basics, then you know you can move on to the technicals, and it'll make it a lot more easier, right? So that's why we practice. That's why I keep my, you know, my practice guide kind of handy dandy, and I've heard lots of people have great results when they follow this instruction. It sounds crazy at first, and when I remember when I was reading this back in the day, and I would see this, you know, that it was a drawing of this and these swirly lines, and I was just like, man, I just want to do some art, you know, I just want to paint something. That's not going to show me how to paint nothing. But when I actually sat down and started doing these exercises and started realizing it was harder than it looked and trying to get them really nice and precise and moving forward, and then I went on to do my name, right? And it was just like, wow, that was night and day, right? Because I could just do my name like it was no big deal. Because now I knew, you know, how to use it. It was not such a foreign thing to me. So once you get good and you practice at doing that kind of stuff, it becomes that simple thing. So it's always about practice, but knowing what practice to do, right? Because you could play football, but if all you're doing is practicing water sports, I don't think you're going to be very good at football, right? So it's all about knowing what practice to do and how to apply it, and that's kind of what all this is, right? So once you get good at it and you apply it correctly, you know, you could do it, and it becomes kind of like second nature, really. So, and then you want to shade it, you know, all that good jazz. So again, start with the basics, do your dots, do your lines, do your dagger strokes, fine, everything fine, the smallest dots, the finest lines, the finest dagger strokes, the finest swirls, the finest lines, and then the finest shadows. And keep them all nice and even, nice and precise. Keep, you know, everything in line and even. The reason you want to keep everything in line and even is, I'm not just being like, oh, it just looks better. No. The whole thing is to train your hand where to be and how to move steady. You know, so it's all about finger, hand, eye, all of it combined to get you your best results. So that's kind of my advice, my finger control tips. And yeah, nothing has really changed. It's just getting more fine. So if going forward, if you've been at this for a year and you're like, man, how does he do those lines? How does he get so fine? You know, I get that question a lot, actually. Like, how do you get to fine lines? Here it is. Practice makes perfect. I can't say it enough. You know, so yeah, make sure you practice. Make sure you get it in. And yeah, I wish you guys all the best of luck. What's up, Dennis? As always, I want to thank you guys for all your support, whether if you just watch the videos or if you're a member of the Skull Squad like these fine gentlemen in the chat here. I appreciate it all. As always, thank you to Createx, our sponsor, for providing the paint for today's video. We use the Createx Wicked Black with their 4011 reducer. We use Createx because honestly, like I've said before, they've been around forever, like forever and ever. The whole entire time I've been airbrushing Wicked colors, Createx colors. The Wicked line is, I don't know how long that's actually been around, but it came around later on. But it was just Createx for the longest of time. Yeah, it was pretty much the go-to paint. It's still the go-to paint. It freaking works. It lasts. You can use it in the sun. You can use it on t-shirts. They have their own reducer line. They have their own clear line. Like, it's really just the overall best airbrush paint there is. You know, not just saying that because they sponsored their channel, but you know, actually I was using it way before then, and we use them just because, like I said, they're the best. So thank you guys all for being members of Skull Squad. If you want to see more videos like this, if you think this helped and you want to see more videos, it always helps to become a member of the Skull Squad. Clicking that join button really does help. So yeah, as always, share this video, and if you'd like to post your results, there's a link to the Mike's Brush Discord down below in the description. You could always check that out, as well as the links for Createx paint, for the paper, and for everything will be down below. So thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. Happy painting!